Dalyrimple Goes Wrong by F. Scott Fitzgerald. In the millennium, an educational genius will write a book to be given to every young man on the date of his dissolution. This work will have the flavor of Montaigne's essays and Samuel Butler's notebooks, and a little of Tolstoy and Marcus Aurelius. It will be neither cheerful nor pleasant, but will contain numerous passages of striking humor. Since first-class minds never believe anything very strongly until they've experienced it, its value will be purely relative. All people over 30 will refer to it as depressing. This prelude belongs to the story of a young man who lived, as you and I do, before the book. 2. The generation which numbered Brian Dalyrimple drifted out of adolescence to a mighty fanfare of trumpets. Brian played the star in an affair which included a Lewis gun and a 9-day romp behind the retreating German lines. So luck triumphant or sentiment rampant awarded him a row of medals, and on his arrival in the States he was told that he was second in importance only to General Pershing and Sergeant York. This was a lot of fun. The governor of his state, a stray congressman, and a citizens' committee gave him enormous smiles and "By God, sirs," on the dock at Hoboken. There were newspaper reporters and photographers who said, "Would you mind?" and "If you could just." And back in his hometown there were old ladies, the rims of whose eyes grew red as they talked to him, and girls who hadn't remembered him so well since his father's business went blah in 1912. But when the shouting died, he realized that for a month he had been the house guest of the mayor, that he had only $14 in the world, and that the name that will live forever in the annals and legends of this state was already living there very quietly and obscurely. One morning he lay late in bed, and just outside his door he heard the upstairs maid talking to the cook. The upstairs maid said that Mrs. Hawkins, the mayor's wife, had been trying for a week to hint Dalyrimple out of the house. He left at 11 o'clock in intolerable confusion, asking that his trunk be sent to Mrs. Beebe's boarding house. Dalyrimple was 23, and he had never worked. His father had given him 2 years at the State University and passed away about the time of his son's 9-day romp, leaving behind him some mid-Victorian furniture and a thin packet of folded paper that turned out to be grocery bills. Young Dalyrimple had very keen gray eyes, a mind that delighted the Army psychological examiners, a trick of having read it, whatever it was, some time before, and a cool hand in a hot situation. But these things did not save him a final, unresigned sigh when he realized that he had to go to work. Right away. It was early afternoon when he walked into the office of Tyrone G. Macy, who owned the largest wholesale grocery house in town. Plump, prosperous, wearing a pleasant but quite unhumorous smile, Tyrone G. Macy greeted him warmly. "Well, how do, Brian? What's on your mind?" To Dalyrimple, straining with his admission, his own words when they came sounded like an Arab beggar's whine for alms. "Why, this question of a job." This question of a job seemed somehow more clothed than just a job. "A job?" An almost imperceptible breeze blew across Mr. Macy's expression. "You see, Mr. Macy," continued Dalyrimple, "I feel I'm wasting time. I want to get started at something. I had several chances about a month ago, but they all seem to have gone." "Let's see," interrupted Mr. Macy. "What were they?" "Well, just at the first, the governor said something about a vacancy on his staff. I was sort of counting on that for a while, but I heard he's given it to Alan Gregg, you know, the son of J.P. Gregg. He sort of forgot what he said to me. Just talking, I guess." "You ought to push those things." "Then there was that engineering expedition, but they decided they'd have to have a man who knew hydraulics, so they couldn't use me unless I paid my own way." "You had just a year at the university?" "2, but I didn't take any science or mathematics. Well, The day the battalion paraded, Mr. Peter Jordan said something about a vacancy in his store. I went around there today and found he meant a sort of floor walker. And then you said something one day." He paused and waited for the older man to take him up, but noting only a minute wince, continued, "About a position, so I thought I'd come and see you." "There was a position," confessed Mr. Macy reluctantly, "but since then we've filled it." He cleared his throat again. "You've waited quite a while." "Yes, I suppose I did. Everybody told me there was no hurry, and I'd had these various offers." Mr. Macy delivered a paragraph on present-day opportunities, which Dalyrimple's mind completely skipped. "Have you had any business experience?" "I worked on a ranch 2 summers as a rider." "Oh, well," Mr. Macy disparaged this neatly, and then continued, "What do you think you're worth?" "I don't know." "Well, Bryan, I tell you, I'm willing to strain a point and give you a chance." Dalyrimple nodded. "Your salary won't be much. You'll start by learning the stock. Then you'll come in the office for a while. Then you'll go on the road. When could you begin?" "How about tomorrow?" "All right. Report to Mr. Hanson in the stockroom. He'll start you off." He continued to regard Dalyrimple steadily until the latter, realizing that the interview was over, rose awkwardly. "Well, Mr. Macy, I'm certainly much obliged." "That's all right. Glad to help you, Bryan." After an irresolute moment, Dalyrimple found himself in the hall. His forehead was covered with perspiration, and the room had not been hot. "Why the devil did I thank the son of a gun?" he muttered.